Wiggle, wiggle.
Like.
Welcome back, everyone. I've been having some of my subscribers just in Discord commenting on if I was going to try and maybe do a review vid on the new Skirmish mode. And honestly, my opinion after playing 3 games is, what is the point? I think, honestly, I don't even know if this is more for just wargaming's doing or just benefit for wargaming. It honestly, in a way, I know with maps in general, typically players will go to one side of the map. So with maps, they'll say, okay, left, right, and typically they probably have a lot of data on people only using the majority of the time one side of a map rather than the other. And the thing about a skirmish mode is it forces you to play on one side of the map rather than giving you the full flexibility of the others. But honestly, I don't really even see what's the point. I mean, you are using half the map instead of full, but you also have less players. And it honestly feels no different than just normal Blitz play. Like, your teams aren't any better, as you can clearly see. I've got 3 replays here, and you are forced to use one side of the map. I guess that is maybe kind of interesting. It like helps you use your brain maybe a little bit more and try to be a little bit more tactical with different types of tanks, because if you're a light tank, you're gonna rely a lot more on that flank where there's hills. Or if you're a heavy tank, you're gonna rely maybe on more areas that you can side scrape or in town or things like that. So like I said, I mean, this really kind of forces you to use one side of the map over the other, but it honestly doesn't feel any different than just a normal gameplay. Now, the thing about this mode is it doesn't affect your stats, win rate, anything. Just like gravity mode, mad games, all that stuff, it's just an event. So you can go in here and, I mean, if you don't want your stats to be affected, you know, this could be the closest thing outside, you know, since the other events are just so crazy. If you want like training or practice or something, if you get a new tank before having it affect your stats going into the skirmish mode, yeah, that's maybe a way to like test your tank out and try things out. But honestly, I almost don't even see the point of this mode. So I don't know, that's just my thoughts and opinions. I would love to know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments below. I think, like I said, in general, when it comes to maps, you have a lot of the times on certain or some maps where players will say, like I said, go right, go left. And the majority of the time, players get really comfortable with only using one side of the map over the other. And by forcing players in this mode to use one side or the other of the map, it does provide potentially a whole new world for some other players that typically don't go one side or the other. But in a way, I don't know if it's more of a benefit for wargaming to collect more data on like the different aspects. Like, they want more data on like different aspects, like for instance, like the desert sands. Like, they want more data on how people are playing, and just to see like how the map works for maybe that side. But I don't know, that almost, now that I think about it, doesn't really make sense, because in general, like wargaming, they always make these changes and improvements to maps. I know they're always looking at different data and things of that sort. And if really chunks or section of the map are just simply not being used, it's just basically dead space in a game anyway. I mean, there could very well be a, you know, like likelihood that some changes. It's not foreign to know in past updates that they've made changes to maps, and just, you know, or either have come out with completely new ones. But I don't know. There's just not really a lot to say here. And one of the things that was just, I don't even know if this was just even more frustrating. And I know I only played just like a few games here, but I typically hate blaming things on my team, but in this mode, I almost couldn't even help it. I felt like my teams were worse in this mode than in just normal mode, and maybe that's just because you have 7 instead of 5, and so there's maybe a greater chance that even though you have some bad players on your team, there's also a better chance you may have some with a slightly higher win rate that can survive longer. But I must have just been put on the side that had just constantly, I don't know, it was just pretty rough. But you know, it was kind of interesting. Was it different for me in terms of like my typical play? And not necessarily, because in terms of how I'll play the game is I'm very aware of my surroundings. At the very beginning of a game, I look at my team's lineup and what we have, what the enemy has, and sometimes you can tell, like, okay, so our best tanks are lightly armored, they have great gun depression. You know, it's going to make sense for the majority of our team to push out on flank and hills so that we can have that advantage. Or if our team has the advantage where we have more armor and not very good gun depression, you know, maybe it might make more sense to push, like, you know, more center or kind of around town. It all kind of depends on the map, but regardless, at the end of the day, you can't control what your team is doing. So I'll look at that lineup and I'll look at the role of the type of tank I am, and I'll position myself accordingly. So I mean, if I'm, you know, a light or medium tank, I'm still going to those positions to try to spot and get eyes on the enemy. The super Pershing that I'm playing here is actually a bit unique, and I don't mean to turn this into a team rant or tank review, but you know, pretty slow, but still classified as a medium tank, has good armor. But anyway, I guess to get back to the point, I mean, really, if you don't like, I guess this mode is really good if you want to test out maybe a brand new tank you get, you don't want it to affect your stats or win rate. Great. I mean, this is a great gameplay or mode for you to go in and have it be as close as you possibly can to the normal game mode without it affecting your stats. I mean, outside of the gravity mode and mad games, I mean, that's just utter chaos and just craziness. But this is as close as a mode, I think, that has come out with that is very similar to just the normal game itself. So for me, I don't know. I really don't necessarily care for things like that. So I'll typically, I mean, for me, I'll look at the stats, you know, kind of make my judgment calls based on there. I can kind of typically just look at the numbers and then go into a game and kind of get an idea of how a tank is. But like I said, I mean, it doesn't affect your stats, your win rate, and really, I mean, all it does is it basically just cuts the map in half. And so, I mean, those are just like a couple of my thoughts on this mode. I mean, I thought it was okay. Just I don't know why, like, it was just a bit frustrating. Maybe it was just because of the few games I had just played back to back here for you guys, just to test it out and give you guys a review. But honestly, like, I do like the different events and modes that Wargaming does come out with. I think it does add some uniqueness, some flavor to the game. Like, I loved the different events just for fun with Mad Games and Gravity Mode. it just kind of gives you this flexibility and freedom just to kind of be crazy. And sometimes it's almost like I don't really think of stats so much. The only thing I really think of is just basically doing my best, and then the stats will follow. I don't really even care so much about my stats. I just care more about how I perform in being good. But anyway, hopefully this review was helpful and not that you were listening to some old grandma in the grocery store that wouldn't stop talking. So anyway, this is the Muffin here. You guys stay cool and keep tanking.